For our friends who believe a convention is too risky, I'd like to state for the record what I think almost every progressive in the country knows. We are not winning. It's not 21-14, to use a football analogy. It's 49-0. We're getting slaughtered. Now, I remember the first discussion I had in this case with Common Cause, and I asked, okay, what is the alternative if you're not going to go to the states? And it was two things. One was demographic changes. I don't know if that takes 2 or 3 decades. I don't know how many decades that takes. The other one was the Supreme Court. How's that working out? So that is, in my opinion, and I think the opinion shared by a lot, but we'll have the discussion, not a very viable path, and it can be overturned by the next Supreme Court. There is only one thing that cannot be overturned. That is a constitutional amendment. And unfortunately, there's only one pathway right now to get that constitutional amendment, and that is to go to the states. Now, I have great news for you. At the state level, the corruption is not anywhere near the level it is at the national. And they are more responsive to their voters because they represent smaller and smaller number of voters. And those voters are overwhelmingly on our side, both Democratic and Republican voters. 93% believe that politicians represent their donors and not their voters. They believe that, unfortunately, our democracy has become completely corrupted. Obviously, that's why I think strategically it is absolutely necessary. And then, of course, people say, well, there are risks. If you're winning and you're up 28-0, don't take any risks. Run up the middle, get your yard and a half, and punt, right? But since we began that conversation, not just with Common Cause, but with everybody in all the different groups, what has happened? We have lost 1,000 seats at the state level, making it much harder. We've lost the House of Representatives, we've lost the Senate, and we lost the presidency to Donald Trump. Every day that we don't do something is a day we fall further behind. While people tell us it's too risky to act, it is far, far riskier not to act. You can read Article 5 for yourself. Article 5 says that whatever is proposed either through Congress or a convention must be ratified by 3/4 of the states. It is one of the hardest constitutions in the world to amend. You must get 3/4 of the states to ratify. Lucky for us, we represent the only issue in the country that 3/4 of the states actually agreed to, which is that money in politics has corrupted and nearly destroyed our democracy. Let's take it to the voters at the state level, and that is our pathway to victory. Thank you. First of all, I want to be clear, I support American Promise and every other group that tries to do it through Congress. And we've had people on the show to fight for that. In fact, I started a whole group called Justice Democrats to create enough momentum in Congress to be able to pursue that path as well. So, and most importantly, that actually several of the panelists here have described, a call for a convention creates enormous pressure for Congress to act. In fact, more than half of our amendments have been because of pressure created by a convention, including the 17th Amendment, which I believe Craig said it was an immutable fact, that how close we got to the convention, the 17th Amendment, forced Congress to go, I meant direct elections of senators. So that these two things help each other. They don't fight each other if you do both, but you must do both. I've got to address some of the things that we say. Rules. There's not enough rules. But Ken is exactly right. The Constitution is not supposed to set out the Robert's Rules of Orders of anything, let alone a convention. But to say that there are no rules and it'll be just mayhem is not true. We've had hundreds of state conventions. There are plenty of rules. We know exactly how it would proceed. Now, you could say, hey, well, look, you're not positive about some of those. I hear you, Craig. But my God, are we going to be frozen into inaction because you're not sure about Rule 17b-3? So we have to go forward, and and by the way, I totally support your call for clarification of rules. And in fact, we've gone and had meetings of Democrats and Republican legislators to try to sort out those rules because we are thinking ahead. And so God bless you on that fight. So great, let's do that together. But let us not say, okay, let's all pause before we figure out the rules. You know what's going to motivate people to figure out the rules? If a convention is coming. Then they're going to say, yes, my God, let's get the rules right. And hold on. And in terms of 1787, look, this is super important. It was ratified. Even 1787, the Constitutional Convention, that was not an Article 5 convention because Article 5 did not exist at the time. That was, the Constitution didn't exist at the time. An Article 5 convention is different. It is limited by definition. But even so, the Constitutional Convention was ratified. In fact, Rhode Island and North Carolina were briefly foreign countries because they refused to ratify. So the ratification process is incredibly important. And the worst case scenario they have is a runaway convention that created the best document ever written. So if you trust the people, you will get to good results.
So I'll work backwards. Bruce, go ahead and question. To the Moderator Council. You know better, Bruce.
Someone on the panel said that the only way is to go through the convention because we'll never get it through Congress. But we can elect a new Congress, and in fact, we have, in my view, have a better chance of doing that than going from the 5. We only have 5 states right now, and we have to get to 34, and the balanced budget thing has been going on for years and years and years, and they still haven't gotten to 34. So what makes you think that we're going to get to 34 before we can elect a new Congress that will be much more amenable to this?
Basically, I'm confused by the fact that if we have, whether it's a convention or the amendment process that we're following, if the amendment wording calls for multiple issues, and there are other amendments that are out there for a single issue, does that constitute, in your case, a call for the same thing? It's confusing to me.
So that's an excellent question. So how many calls are there for a convention, and can you put them together? So that's actually one of the most important questions. And before it was unsettled because there was actually hundreds of calls for a convention on different issues. And so it seemed like, well, if you wanted an unlimited convention, a general convention like the 1787, you could have one. Well, the last couple of years has been a great clarifying moment because Congress started counting. They started counting all the different convention calls. Right now, they have counted up to 75 from 36 different states. So that is enough. You need 34 states to call for a convention. The reason we don't have one is because they have decided, and Ken is right, all of these groups agree, American Bar Association, Congressional Research Service, Department of Justice, and the Senate Judiciary Committee. You cannot combine issues. If you could combine issues, we would already have one. In fact, it would be a constitutional obligation for Congress to call one. So we've settled that issue. You cannot combine them. It must be limited.
Okay, and then I'm going to put the last, maybe a slight rephrasing of the ALEC question to Viki, because it may be somewhat responsive to Cenk's, because I hear in both of these some concern about what if there's different calls, and so what is to prevent ALEC from mucking it up, in the legal phrase, mucking it up.
I like mucking it up.
Once the convention begins. Is that a fair characterization of your question?
I think it's whether it's ALEC or any special interest group, I think we have a concern. We can poo-poo the rules all we want to, but the truth of the matter is we don't even know who would be at the convention. Would it be one person from Wyoming and one person from California? Is that really fair for America? So we don't even know who's going to go there, how they're going to be picked. I just want to say we've been working to pass an ethics commission in New Mexico for 5 decades. We finally passed it last year to put it on the ballot because we don't have a ballot measure mechanism. We have to go through the state to get it on there. The number one question the people in New Mexico have about an ethics commission, they're like, oh, that sounds like a great idea. Wait a minute, who the hell is going to choose who's on that commission, Viki? Because if it's legislators or the courts or any of those people, then I'm not going to trust it. Why would this be any different at all?
I've got to, real quick, I've got to address that. So you asked the question of how do we know? So ALEC has already taken over a body that can propose an amendment, so that's really scary. It's called the United States Congress. They already own that. So my point is that that a convention at least gives us an opportunity to get there. And whatever you do, do not get scared. 3/4 of the states must ratify. A convention is only to propose an amendment. 3/4 must ratify. And for all you progressives out there, I'm sorry, but we're not going to get a really progressive amendment. We're not going to get a really conservative amendment. We're only going to get one that an overwhelming majority of Americans agree with. And great news for us. Overwhelming majority of Americans agree on only one issue, which is to get money out of politics.